The Budget 2024, tabled in Parliament today, places emphasis on the economic restructuring to boost the country's economic growth, along with efforts to enhance the standard of living for the people. A sum of 393.8 billion ringgit is allocated for the budget, which Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim described as the highest in the history of the country. With the theme of economic reformation, people empowerment, Budget 2024 conveys the determination and seriousness of the unity government to raise the economic level of the country and the people.
Hari ini dibentangkan belanjawan madani kedua sebagai kesinambungan dasar yang menelurusi kerangka ekonomi madani. Semua usaha yang dirangka akan menyusul setiap keutamaan dan penanda aras ekonomi madani yang dicerakinkan kepada tiga tumpuan utama, iaitu pertama, tata kelola terbaik demi ketangkasan perkhidmatan. Kedua, penstrukturan semula ekonomi bagi melonjak pertumbuhan. Dan ketiga, peningkatan darjat hidup rakyat.
Datuk Seri Anwar said a large chunk of the amount is going to three ministries, namely Finance, Education and Health, collectively accounting for 42.3% of the total. He also said as much as 303.8 billion ringgit will be channeled to operating expenditure, while the remaining 90 billion ringgit will be allocated to development expenditure, with 2 billion ringgit in contingency savings. The education sector remains the main component under the budget that receives the highest allocation. The Education Ministry will receive 58.7 billion ringgit, an increase from 55.2 billion ringgit allocated in 2023. The funds include 1.9 billion ringgit to be used for upgrading and maintaining all schools nationwide. A total of 26 new schools will also be built, with the total cost of the projects amounting to 2.5 billion ringgit. Regarding taxes, the Premier said the tax revenue collected by the government is one of the lowest in ASEAN. That is only 11.8% to GDP. Accordingly, he said starting next year, several taxation reform measures will be implemented to expand the national revenue base, while at the same time not to burden the majority of the people. The government plans to increase the service tax rate to 8% instead of 6% and enforce the implementation of capital gains tax or CGT for the disposal of unlisted shares by local companies based on net profit at a rate of 10% from March 1st, 2024. The government is also expected to implement a global minimum tax in 2025, which will only apply to companies with a global income of at least 750 million euros. On the move to rationalize subsidies, Datuk Seri Anwar said it will be implemented in stages beginning next year. This includes a gradual rationalization of petroleum subsidies involving diesel, where exemptions will be given to only a select few. He said the savings from the subsidy rationalization will be partly used to increase cash aid allocations through Sumbangan Tunai Rahmah from 8 billion to 10 billion ringgit. Meanwhile, the government will set aside 44 billion ringgit in loans and financing guarantees for the benefit of micro, small and medium-scale enterprises under the budget. Loan funds under Bank Negara Malaysia amounting to 900 million ringgit will be provided to encourage SME companies to increase business productivity through automation and digitalization. The government will also allocate up to 10% of the total investment in the new Industrial Master Plan or NIMP 2030 as a catalyst to drive the plan's mission with an initial fund of 200 million ringgit in 2024. The Prime Minister said NIMP is targeting a total investment of up to 95 billion ringgit, creating 3.3 million job opportunities with an intermediate salary of up to 4,510 ringgit a month by 2030. He said the Madani Economy Framework is to uplift Malaysia's name as a regional economic champion. In order to achieve that aim, he said the economic structure needs to be revamped and reorganized so that the existing potential can be developed further. Good evening and Salam Malaysia Madani. I'm Otto Othman and you are watching our special Malaysia Tonight edition for Budget 2024. Now, with the tabling of the Budget 2024 earlier today by Datuk Sri Anwar, we now have a clearer picture on what this year's supply bill will be about. Now, to discuss about what it actually means to the rakyat, the industry and also the country as a whole, joining me in the studio tonight are two very well-versed guests in economic matters. We have Associate Professor Ahmad Razman Abdul Latif, MBA, Program Director of Putra Business School, and Chief Economist of Bank Muamalat Malaysia Berhad, Dr. Muhammad Afzal Nizam Abdul Rashid. Thank you very much. How are we today?
Very good.
Fine.
Very good. First of all, thank you very much for taking the time off your busy schedule to be with us here tonight. And we'll straight on with the first question, yeah? So our first question is for Dr. Afzal Nizam. Now, the government is proposing to increase the service tax from 6% to 8% with exclusion on service involving food and beverage and also telecommunication. How much would you think it will impact the daily lives of the people and changes our expenditure pattern?
Yeah, I think we need to look at in a broader scheme of things. Of course, if you want to focus on the impact on general prices, well, I think it might have in terms of the inflationary impact, and it has also been reflected in the government's forecast for inflation for next year. The government is looking inflation rate of between 2.1% to 3.6% next year. However, I think the main reason for that is actually to boost up the government's coffers, because the government is in need to make sure that they are on track to achieve the fiscal deficit target of 3% to 3.5% by end of 2025. So certainly next year the journey should be on the way down. This year is expected to be 5%. So I think that's the context. But in terms of the actual impact, we have yet to ascertain that. But nonetheless, the government has indicated that there will be exclusion in terms of the sectors, the food and beverages. And if you look at food and beverages or F&B, it actually account about close to 30% of CPI, the Consumer Price Index. So if you exclude that, theoretically the impact would be minimal in that sense. Similarly for telecommunications. So I think the government is trying to find a delicate balance between increasing the government revenues and also to ensure that all of our society will be covered under this budget. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, next, Dr. Razman, the government is often talked about rationalizing subsidy to reduce the country's fiscal burden. However, the savings is partly used to increase cash aid allocations through Sumbangan Tunai Rahmah from 8 billion ringgit to 10 billion ringgit next year. So how is such initiative sustainable for the people and the government in the long run, Doctor?
Well, in my opinion, this initiative will only be sustainable if the government manage to increase its revenue more than it spend every year, which is not happening now. As like Dr. Anwar said, we are still having this fiscal deficit every year, probably next year targeted at negative 4.3%. So I see it as just like a gradual transition of reducing the subsidy expenditure and providing more cash assistance to those people in need. Well, if you look into the system by the developed countries or economies, this is exactly what they are doing. They actually having a more targeted cash assistance to the people rather than having the subsidy. In fact, Malaysia at the time, at this moment, actually one of the country that have the highest subsidy amount being allocated. So this is actually a transition towards more cash assistance rather than having a subsidy for all.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much to our guests for that very brief and very detailed little information that you've shared with us. Now, we are going to go for a little short break, but when we return, we'll return with our guests and some more details about today's interview. So stay with us.
Untuk memberi jaminan kepada semua rakyat, golongan minoriti, golongan terpinggir, golongan di pedalaman, bahawa setiap rakyat dan warga mereka akan dipertahankan hak mereka.
Ikuti mesyuarat ketiga penggal kedua Parlimen Malaysia ke-15. Dewan Rakyat pada 9 Oktober hingga 30 November 2023 dan di Dewan Negara pada 27 November hingga 14 Disember 2023, 10 pagi sehingga 12 tengah hari di TV1 dan pada 10.05 pagi sehingga selesai persidangan di saluran Berita RTM.
Welcome back. Dr. Afzal Nizam, aside from reinvigorating the government-linked companies, right? Linked companies, GLCs, and the government investment-linked companies, GLICs, small business were also not left out in the budget 2024. Now, business loan facilities will be given to micro, small, and medium enterprises through loans and financing guarantees amounting to up to 44 billion ringgit. Now, all these incentives will surely boost the domestic direct investments. Your thoughts on the micro SME contribution to the economy?
Yeah, I think the government is trying to address the excess of finance among the MSME sectors. And by providing guarantees, this will incentivize the banks, the commercial banks, to actually extend financing to this group. And with that, such guarantees from SGPP, for instance, it actually creates certainties over the credit risk. So in that sense, it will, help improve the source of funds for the MSMEs, for their working capitals, for their capital expenditure. That's on one hand. On the other, I think if you look at the matching grants for the IT card program, it was boosted up from 10 million this year to 25 million ringgit.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. Yeah. So and that goes to show that the IT card financing program, the microfinancing program, it's really working. And with the combinations of the matching grants, the structured training, and also the microfinancing, actually can help these B40 entrepreneurs to actually become successful entrepreneurs. Some of them be able to recruit new workers, and in fact, some of them actually being elevated from the B40 group. So I think looking from the success in the past 2 years or 3 years in terms of IT card programs, I think that's the main reason the government actually bumped up the allocations for the matching grants. Yeah.
Okay. Now, Dr. Razman, the government is mulling to introduce global minimum tax for a company with a global income of at least 750 million euros in 2025. Now, would this stimulate more foreign direct investments or otherwise, and what's the rationale of such tax?
Yes, we hope so, that more foreign direct investment will be coming from this introduction of global minimum tax. Otherwise, we are not going to be competitive among other countries and might be left out from such investment opportunity. But of course, by focusing on a company that is worth more than 750 million euros, we hope that the kind of FDI will be the one that will allow us to become a nation that utilizing the high technology and employing the highly skilled people rather than simply focusing on the volume of investment coming into the country. So this is actually the rationale of such tax to attract more investment into the country.
Now, on a related note, Doctor, part of the soon-to-be introduced visa liberalization plan is to improve the visa on arrival facility, to include the multiple entry visa offers to encourage the entry of tourists and investors, especially from India and China. So why such preference on these two Asian countries?
Right. If you look at the statistic, the number of foreign tourists coming to Malaysia, China actually the second highest after Singapore. And looking at China itself, they have 400 million of middle income population, and they do have high spending power. And so it makes sense to make sure that they can have easier access to our country. And when talking about India, some says they are the next China, because looking at the growth of their economic development and also the increase of their middle income population. But of course, the concern whether they will remain here and not going back to the country is another issue that also need to be addressed eventually.
Now, these two giants, right, just to add a little bit more on this issue as well, why not other Asian countries as well? Aside from, okay, we know that India is a giant and also China is a giant country. Has there been any thought to other countries as well, since we're part of ASEAN as well?
Yes, I think for Asian countries, there's not much difficulties for these people to come here as a tourist, whether it's a medical tourist or sport tourist. So this is something that we want to make sure that no countries being left out, especially the important trading partners to Malaysia.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much to our guests for today. We are going to go for a little short break, and when we come back, we'll be back with our guests in just a short bit. Welcome back, and thank you very much for staying tuned. Now, question for both our panelists. The economic report published yesterday cited that the economy is expected to grow 4 to 5% amid moderate global growth in 2023 and 2024. Now, are these numbers achievable? Let's start with Doctor.
Well, I think if you look at this year's forecast, it was revised down from 4 to 5% to circa 4%. If you look at the economic reports, the actual, the target for this year actually around 3.9%. So next year, government is looking at 4% to 5%. And given the uncertainties over the external front, I think the more reasons that the government needs to beef up their efforts to promote domestic demand. And on that note, I think it really explains why the government is still in an expansionary mode instead of fiscal policy stand, and it is being reflected in terms of their target for deficit of 4.3%. And we can see that the allocations for the development expenditure is quite sizable. So that would mean expenditure on infrastructure, which can benefit to give benefits to the construction sector. So that can actually reinvigorate capital spending among firms next year. So I think that those are the measures to counter the possible slowdown globally next year.
Dr. Razman, your thoughts?
My thoughts, I don't think government would like to achieve this number at all costs, because when we look at the text of the 2024 budget, the focus actually more on the concern of or the welfare of the people. And there's no point of achieving 4 to 5% growth if the people still suffering from high inequality in terms of wealth and income. The rich getting richer and the poor even poor. And that's why in the budget, if you notice, the government set the target to increase the median salary from 2,424 to 4,100 and above. So that no one will be left out. So I think that's actually the priority for the government to ensure that the salary will be increased through the progressive wage, and also how even when the cost of living keep getting higher and higher, the people can still afford it because they already have a better income and better wealth.
Mm-hmm. Now, Doctor, I would like to ask this other question over here, totally out of topic. When it comes to manufacturing as well, Malaysia is a hub for manufacturing and it's increased so far to this year as well. I would just want to know on your thoughts as well, because I asked a previous interviewee as well. Do you think our culture is well prepared for what we have in store, particularly with the budget that we have? Are we well prepared for the next future, like 7 years from now, the NIMP for 2030? Are we well prepared for that? in terms of our culture, work culture, or even our ethics and all that? We'll start with Dr. Afzanizam.
Sure. I think the policies are there. I mean, it's been laid out under NETR, NIMP. It's a question of how these plans are being translated into executions. So therefore, I think there will be, I suppose there will be more engagement sessions with the industry players on how we could actually transition towards this sustainable economy. I think the one thing that needs to be focused on is the impact if you don't do anything about it. I mean, does not take into consideration on the risk of climate change. If you talk about that more often, then people would know that actually, the excessive erratic weather conditions, the rising sea level, which can actually translate into shocks to the economy if it's, let's say, it happens. So something has to be done to try to actually reverse it, hopefully. So this investment or this transition needs to happen. So I think the communication bit needs to be improved on the awareness if you don't do anything about climate change. So I think culture-wise, it will take some time, but if people start to understand and appreciate the risks associated not doing anything, then I think that it will set the right behavior then.
I would say I would also agree with a lot of our listeners and viewers as well that we have been working a lot to achieve so far where we are right now. So, Dr. Azman, what do you think? Are we ready for this next step, this 7 years for the NIMP? In terms of our work culture, policies has been set, but in our minds, are we ready in terms of like climate change and all that? We have already electrical vehicles. Are we ready?
Okay, we are good at making policies, announcing new initiative and ideas. And when talking about are we ready, do we have the right culture, some of this can be enhanced further, especially when talking about the accountability, because for the past few years, we do not have this kind of stability in the government. So when you are not there for the long run, so you don't actually commit to it. But now, I think, for the next few years, we indeed have some form of stability, which will translate into higher accountability and higher transparency. Reporting on the progress is important, actually for me more important than coming up with the initiative, because people can announce things, but to actually execute and report and be accountable to what they have done is actually more important. So I think with the right attitude of accountability and transparency, it is possible that we will have the right culture and achieve the target.
Now, we have talked in detail on what this bill will actually bring to the country and its people and how it will affect our economic outlook into the next year. Before we pull the curtain down on tonight, do you have any anticipated allocations made into this list, actually? We begin with Dr. Azman.
Oh, okay. Few days back, I actually gave comment to one of the reporters. What I was hoping from this budget. I said higher allocation to education and health, and indeed, the amount allocated has been increased for education. 3.5 billion to 58.7 billion, and also have 4.9 billion to 41.2 billion. And when we look into the actual expenditure allocated, it's actually more focusing now towards all these important sectors, which I'm glad. Although there's one allocation that did not make to the list, I was hoping there will be more effort towards making sure that the people able to own their own house, especially the M40s. It's not there, but hopefully it will be in some other form of policy.
Dr. Azwanizam, what do you think?
Yeah, I was hoping for the subsidy rationalization to occur, especially for fuel. It did happen for diesel. At least that's for a good start. So I think we are in the right directions. It's just that we need to educate, or perhaps, well, again, improving on the communication bit to the society, to the public, that the reform has to happen. We are not sure what sort of economic prospect going forward, then therefore the more reason that the government finances has to be resilient, and with that I think it will improve their fiscal space for them to respond for any possible uncertainties going forward. So I think the subsidy rationalisation happened. They start with diesel, so I think that's a good move, I think.
What about RON 95 then? Since it was
I think the government is wary about the potential impact to the inflation. If you look at RON 95, I think the bulk of the allocation for subsidies, for fuel subsidies, actually goes to the RON 95. If you touch that, definitely it will have a direct, immediate reactions in terms of the inflations. And at the moment, we are, being confronted with multiple factors in terms of inflation. We have food inflation, which is still affecting our economy. If you look at rice, for instance, if you look at the headline CPI for August at 2%, but if you drill down the number, rice is on the rise in terms of inflation, 3% in August from 2.4% in July, so it's on the way up. Although rice only accounted about 1.1% of the total weighting in CPI, it may not have a full impact in terms of CPI in general terms, but people, men on the street, actually would feel it. So I think the government is mindful of that implication. So I think they will start with diesel as a means to rationalise the subsidies.
Dr. Razman, what do you think about that as well, with RON 95 being a bit part of not of the budget? What do you think?
Would you prefer it?
I think so.
So I think, like Dr. Aziz said, it's important to take note of what's happening on the ground. But towards the end of the Dato' Sri Anwar's speech, he also mentioned a story where to introduce something good, but done hastily or drastically, might not be beneficial in the end, because people will respond negatively towards it. So I think that's the approach that the government wants to do. Gradual transition, so that it will not be too harsh on the people. And that's actually what we can see overall in this budget. Government has stated this is what we're going to do, but not necessarily we're going to implement everything at once. We still have time, we still have enough buffer of our finance to do this, and hopefully for the next few years we'll be resilient enough to finally able to complete the whole change of the system or the policy.
Well, thank you very much for all your insights. It seems that we don't have enough time, but thank you so much for those of you who are watching in right now. And of course, that's all the time that we have. And I would like to thank our guest, Associate Professor Dr. Ahmad Razman Abdul Latif, and also Dr. Muhammad Afzal Nizam Abdul Rashid for their insights on Budget 2024. And of course, I'm Otto Othman. And of course, I'd like to invite our guest later on after this for his little drinks and enjoy a bit of talk off air. So that's it for today. I'm Otto Othman. Malaysia Madani, tekad perpaduan, penuhi harapan. Peradaban kita bangunkan, bina kota, bina insan. Dari budi jadi budaya, bina asas kemampanan. Kesejahteraan masa depan. Ayo seluruh anak berdiri, bangunkan Malaysia Madani. Sepenuh hati, jiwa, semangat, terus meyakini Malaysia Madani.